Hello and welcome to Postcards from Antioch, another in our series looking at Christian living. And this podcast is all about growing in leadership, in theology and biblical understanding. And today I'm delighted to have Daniel with us. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, you all right?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, and we're looking today about discipleship in the workplace. So last week, or last episode, if the listeners listened in, we were looking at discipleship in the home, and we've done one on general Christian living, spiritual disciplines. And today, you're our expert of the workplace, Daniel. I hope that encourages you.
Yeah, I've been in work 25 years now, which seems like an awful long time. Even longer still to go, which is a bit disappointing, but there you go.
Yeah. So you've been in the workplace for 25 years. Tell us a bit about yourself so that the listeners are a bit aware. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm an accountant by trade, work in small businesses generally, done a bit in construction, a bit in recruitment. My day job is generally managing a sort of team of finance people, so pretty glamorous. Yeah. It's kind of all the paperwork stuff that no one else wants to do, really.
There we go. And so that's your work situation at the moment, or I know there's been a bit of a change recently.
Yeah, recently been made redundant. So, looking for work at the moment. Got an interview this evening, 4 o'clock actually, later. So, hopefully I'll have something new coming up soon.
Good. And you've been a part of Barton Church for a while, longer than I have. I remember meeting you when I visited. So, how long have you been a part of the church?
Yeah, ever since we got married sort of about 25 years ago. So, been part of it. Sort of came as a sort of a young professional, I suppose, and had our kids here, and they've come through all the youth and children's, left for university, back for Christmas.
There we go. Oh, it must be lovely having them back after that first term of university.
Yeah, for sure.
To catch up and be together. And Daniel, I've always been really encouraged by your ability to understand theology of the Bible and teach, and you've done some teaching in different spheres of church life over the years. But this is a bit of a new one, but looking forward to how we can think about what faith in the workplace or discipleship in the workplace. So I wonder how we can start maybe by just asking how you've found living out your faith in the workplace, how you've found growing in your discipleship in that context.
Sure. I think in some ways work is just another place that we live as Christians, that we kind of meet people, that we associate with them, get stuff done. So in a way, it's just another area that we have to learn how to live as Christians. But I think there are certain kind of features to work that I found. So I noted in a couple of things. I kind of feel a bit of an outsider quite often, not because people aren't friendly or anyone's deliberately so, but we kind of have a different set of values, and people don't necessarily know that much about being a Christian. Certainly, sort of being a Christian in reality, as opposed to perhaps what they see on the TV and that kind of stuff. And we have some peculiar views compared to other people, which make you stand out. So I quite often I feel a bit of an outsider, and similar to that, I feel a bit of an underdog. I feel like sometimes work can be quite big. You can have a boss who's several rungs ahead of you. You can have big things going on, like an Ofsted in a school, or a year-end audit, or big challenges. Lots of information flying around the place, and it can be quite intimidating. And I think we can either shrink back from that and be kind of affected by that, or we can take God into the workplace with us, kind of thing. So I kind of think like David and Goliath. Goliath is standing there in front of him. He didn't think, my goodness, I need to make a tactical withdrawal or something, or try and change the dynamics. He was just angry that someone was standing up to the people of God. How dare they? When God is this great, great person to be worshipped. He just couldn't get past that. And I think to a certain extent in the workplace, when you've got big challenges, you've got big things that scare you or intimidate you, you have to have that sense that God's put me here for a reason. God is with me in the room. And sometimes that gives you a bit of confidence to stand up and be different when, it's not that easy.
Yeah. Oh, that's helpful to hear. And I guess different people have different experiences of the workplace. Some might be bosses, others might be new employees. You've outlined your context and how you felt as that outsider underdog. And that, I think, certainly the outsider element can often be the case. I know before I came into working for a church in a school teaching setting, I could relate to both of those at various points, and maybe it changed a bit through some of it, but certainly that's helpful to open up. And I wonder then, so as Christians, we read the Bible, we want to understand what the Bible means. What does the Bible say about work? Is there a theology of work that would be helpful for us to sort of a framework to understand, or is that just what happens and really it's about the Sunday service?
Well, definitely not. So, I've got 3 C's. So, creation. When I look at the creation account, I find that quite applicable to work. It's God's work. You know, it's the work He did. He created order out of chaos. He completed a task. He saw that it was good, and then He rested. And I find that pattern quite intriguing. And where I've got sort of a little bit more scope to kind of manage my own workload, the longer I've been in work, I want to try and shape my work like that, because I think so. Sort of taking those in order, I want to create something good. You know, obviously God created the world, pretty impressive. But you know, it was creative. He created something from nothing. He sustains it. It's something He takes great pride in, and I want to try and do some work that I can be proud of, something that uses my skills, something that matches my interests and so forth. So as much as we can, it would be good to kind of have work that helps us to be like God, not obviously completely like God, but to share that kind of those characteristics that He wants us to be an image bearer for Him.
And I guess you got to be creative with numbers, making sure they balanced at the end of the month. Is that right?
Not too creative, but yeah, it's kind of, you know, that's one of my gifts, that I can, you know, play with numbers. But if you can get something that you can be good at, that's a good feature of work. God actually, He completed His task. He got to the end of His 6 days. He'd created the world. It's so important for us to have points in our work life where we get to a position, we finish something, and we can say, yeah, that's satisfying. My inbox is clear. I can go for the weekend, or, you know, I've kind of handed in my essay, or whatever it is. It's really important for us not to have this never-ending task list that is just so draining and frustrating. So as much as I can, I try and develop a cycle where I can actually say, stop at a point and say, yep, I've completed this. Similar to that, at the end of creation, God looked at what He made and He said it was very good. And I think it's really important for us, as much as we can, and sometimes you get a job that pays the bills and that's all it is, kind of thing. But if you can find a job where you can say, yeah, I'm good at this, and I can see that me putting that effort in was worth it because I got this outcome, or I made this person's life easier, or I created something, or whatever it is. But you have that opportunity to say, yep, this is good. And then finally God rested, not because He needed it, but He needed us to see that rest is important. And I think that whole cycle in work, you know, it may not be weekly. It might be that you have a really busy spell, but you know that the following month it's a bit quieter. It gives you a chance to catch up, perhaps look ahead because you know you've got another busy spell coming up. It's really important for work to have that, understand the cycle that it operates in, and make it manageable. So it's not kind of necessarily strict Bible teaching, but it's a pattern that I've found helpful in terms of creation. And then a couple of other quick points. It's cursed. So I think sometimes work is hard, and you can't really see the reason why. You don't know why God is allowing it to be so hard, or why intrinsically it's difficult. And we know that the effect is the curse. Things go against us, even with our best efforts. It just doesn't seem to work out. Time, chance, unfairness kind of is around us, and so work won't always be perfect. And we know that as Christians because of the curse. And then the last C is community. Work is very much a place where you get to know people, spend time with them. Quite often you're sitting across from someone in an office and you find out all about them in a way that you perhaps wouldn't in any other context, because you just kind of living your life side by side with people. You get to work in teams, you get to take on challenges. You tend to be sometimes in stressful situations where you find out what people really like.
Yeah.
Work is kind of a community area aspect, and I think the Bible talks a lot about kind of how good it is for people to be in community and be in relationships. So
a bit of a case against remote working, then, isn't it? Sort of
well, that
the end of Zoom and Teams.
Yeah, that will be interesting, because there's certain things that are good over a remote kind of setting. I find some where you've got a strict agenda, you can get through a whole load of actions in a quick way, and the participants can just join and then carry on with the rest of their day. That's great. But for people that are starting out in work, trying to get a feel of how it's done, understand the culture that you're working amongst, it's very, very difficult to pick up those little kind of cues from a sort of a computer screen in front of you.
That's right. It seems to be okay at just about maintaining, but it's not great at creating community. Yeah, that's right. And in a workplace, that's a big part of the joy and the good in work is community. Yeah. I mean,
I'm a very sort of task focused kind of person. I can happily beaver away at something for a long period of time, and not need sort of interaction. But I've worked from home for sort of 3 years predominantly, and it's taken its toll. I think there's even the most kind of introverted person, I think, needs that social interaction in a face-to-face setting, just to be healthy, really.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So creation, curse, bit of reality. It's not all good and wonderful. Most people might in fact be in jobs that they struggle with, that are frustrating, that have got the corruption or ethics they don't agree with, or pressures that aren't fair on them, or whatever it might be. But that you've also highlighted the benefit of doing that with others, a sense of team, community. It's biblically that's a really helpful framework to think about, and maybe listeners and certainly myself reflect on how my work interacts in those ways. So if that's a part of, so we're saying that in the Bible, a theology of work is good, but like everything, susceptible to sin and wrong and the curse, essentially. But then God works through community to counter that in a way, and for us to keep going in spite of that. What are some of the purposes that God works through in the workplace to achieve?
So I think like all areas of flawed humanity, it needs to be redeemed. So we know that Christ came to forgive us our sins and to give us a new life, and to bring his Holy Spirit so that we could be new people. And I think that's true of work. I don't see work as necessarily good or bad. I think it's important. I think we need it. But I don't think it's necessarily morally good or bad in and of itself. But I think it can be good. And I think, that there are aspects that are hard, that are cursed. But I think that we can bring God into our work and take the opportunity that it is to use for good or for bad, and hopefully for good. I think there are some people that are in really difficult positions out of necessity in work, and I feel for them. But I'm encouraged by Paul. He told slaves in his context. I think I've got a verse written down here. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And he kind of took the slave boss out of the equation. He said, just work for me. And I find that really liberating, because sometimes, maybe your boss is careless and lets you get on with whatever you want to do. So you're tempted to just kick back. And in that situation, you're thinking, no, I'm working for God. Is he happy with what I've done today? And equally, if your boss is unreasonable and is just throwing all that kind of workload on you and, you're struggling, you can sort of step away from that boss and say, God, look, you know what I've tried to do today. I didn't get it all done, or it was beyond me, or I'm stressed, or whatever it can be. You can talk to God, who understands you like no one else does, and have a clear conscience before him as your ultimate boss. And I find that quite a sort of a helpful kind of aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really useful, I think, and it can be applied again in any work context, can't it? That ultimately Jesus is our Lord. If we're saying we're Christians, we're following him, and we put our discipleship as the key aspect or lens through which we look at all of life, the workplace included. We can achieve his purposes there, even when it's hard and frustrating. So what might be some of the challenges that you've experienced or that others might experience in the workplace? Especially in regard to maybe being a barrier to achieving what we would see as his purposes for us at work.
Yeah, I mean, being sort of, just taking my personal experience, I think stress and overworking are major things for me. I'm a different person when I'm stressed, and it kind of, I've already mentioned I'm quite a task-focused person. It just gets worse the more stressed I am, because I just feel like I've just got to, crash out all this work. And I go into tunnel vision. I don't see people around me, and I'm just sort of smashing through the work. And okay, that might be okay for a specific deadline. It's just got to be done. People would understand. But I think over the long term, it really reduces me taking that opportunity that I've got working with people to try and be a blessing to them. So stress, I mean, it's difficult to know what to do about that. Sort of sometimes stress feels like it's imposed upon you, but being aware of it maybe means I have to think about that and work out strategies to kind of avoid the stress and the overworking. Another area is sort of integrity. I work in finance. I'm kind of the keeper of the books, and from time to time people want me to kind of, step around some of the rules and help them kind of get a better deal than they ought to be getting, and so forth. And I think when I was earlier in my career, I found that really hard. I still do, but I tend to, with experience, I've almost preempted that, and I've been able to have the opportunity to talk to people about where I stand and what my ethics are, and generally I get respected for that. I think people appreciate the candid honesty, and they get the benefits of it as well because they can trust me, kind of thing. So I think integrity is an issue, because quite often you're imposing your values on someone else who don't necessarily share exactly the same thing, and you're making their life difficult just to make your conscience remain clear. So it feels almost like you're being a burden. But we believe that we're doing the right thing for God, and God will prosper what we're doing if we do it the right way. So kind of it's a bit of a clash between what you're trying to do for God and what it comes across as to kind of other people, I think.
Which I guess links a bit back to that whole outsider feeling.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of clash of views or cultures and values. Yeah.
I think the last thing I thought of was what I call a toxic culture. I think without meaning it for it to happen, a work culture can easily descend into something that's really harmful for the people that are part of it. And sometimes that feels like it's bigger than you, so you don't feel like you can necessarily correct the direction the big tanker is going. You feel like you're a small part in the machine, but it's very harmful, and you feel it, and you see sort of even in sort of minor bullying, these things have profound effects on people. Sort of the work, the overworking starts off small, but really eats into people's relationships and their home life and all this kind of stuff. So it is a massive issue, particularly where you don't feel like you feel powerless to change it. But I think it just reminds us that even in work, whilst it won't necessarily feel like a spiritual battle because you're not, out there kind of claiming souls for God, it is a spiritual battle because there is evil stuff out there, and we need to pray into that, particularly when we're feeling we can't physically change it ourselves. We need to sort of go each day and just say, Lord, can I improve it a bit?
Yeah, they're helpful areas that maybe we can all relate to. Certainly, that's helpful. I think so. That's the challenges that might arise, or some of them at least. What might be some moments where you felt, I really glorified God with my day? I worked with integrity. I managed to model a bit of different culture, kingdom culture. And you felt this was something that I can thank God for.
Yeah, I don't know if I doubt myself too much, but I don't know yet is probably my answer. I mean, there have been instances where I've been able to talk to people about Jesus, that I've been able to invite them to church and things like that, which is great. And there are things that I think, I did that well, and I think particularly in my role, it's important to give people kind of an understanding of where the business sits, how it's doing, that kind of stuff. So I felt like I've done that well. But I guess what I'd love to be able to see, and maybe I won't find this out yet, is how God's used all those different little things that I've tried to do in his big picture, in his purposes, and that I don't think I've seen yet. That I've got a lot of questions. Why did that business not work out? Why was it so difficult? Why is it so hard to get people to do this, that, and the other? And I've got a lot of these questions which I haven't got answers to yet. But I remember Mordecai speaking to Esther, and he said, and who knows what that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. So she had a very unique set of circumstances, and God just placed her just there to save the Jewish people, just by being there, really, and being able to influence. And I guess that's my kind of hope, is that we're all kind of doing our best, praying into our various opportunities that we have in whatever that work is, and we're praying that God will just put us in the right place at the right time. We may not know sort of even then what it's done to help, but you just pray that it will be used. But equally, I guess there is that challenge to say, am I being sort of intentional about using this opportunity? Am I allowing the overworking, the stress, or whatever, just to kind of defeat me completely? Are there things that I need to change? Do I need to ask other people how they deal with it? So I kind of don't want to let myself off the hook with it, but equally we don't know exactly what God's doing, so we leave it to him in some ways.
I think that's really helpful. It's humble of you, but also very helpful to just think about the way that we can glorify God in the work sphere by getting on with the job that we're responsible for, with that integrity, hopefully being like salt and light. And that often makes us think, I'll be the one that's preaching, I'll be the one that's praying for someone in the corner, but actually more often than not, it isn't those things, although those things are good. It's by modeling good, faithful integrity, by completing, respecting your leaders, by doing the things that are seeking to make a difference and be of good, because that in itself is glorifying. So I suppose when, just as you were talking, I reflected that as the business deal doesn't go through that you might have prayed about and hoped for and would have really brought prosperity to your business, even when it doesn't, you can be glorifying God because you are modeling something of a quiet peace and trust that maybe colleagues aren't, and that might lead to conversations, or it might lead to just honouring God in that moment, and that being your act of worship in the working environment, as much as seeing the business deal go through, winning a contract and praising God because it's an answered prayer. And so really interesting. Just last couple of things I thought would be helpful to think about before we wrap up this episode. And maybe one is, we've thought quite a lot about work or a career, the demands on individuals more than a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for many people. And how do you begin to manage your time with family? You've been involved at Barton Church for many years. How do you grow in your spiritual life when there are so many pressures on your hours and on the responsibility that you've had to carry in your, responsible positions in leadership?
I mean, in many ways, I feel very fortunate. I've my wife's great. She kind of manages our household really. I kind of do my bit, but I've been very blessed. And but I think there are the pressures and the stresses have actually forced me to call out to God, and I think probably I've learned perhaps in the hardest times that I need to commit my day to God. In some ways, when the pressure's off and I just I feel like I can cope with this day on my own. They've been really sort of negative days, just no focus, no kind of sense of God with me. Whereas those difficult days, I've known that it's beyond me, and I've had to commit it to God. And I think that's been a helpful discipline. So many times as I've prayed, as I've kind of tried to read at least a small passage of scripture each morning, God's spoken through that. And I thought, okay, that's refocused. Sometimes I've had a passage of work which has been particularly difficult, and at the same time I've been struggling through a hard passage or a series of passages in the Bible, and almost like the struggle has mirrored my work situation. It's almost been companionship through the Bible, just seeing other people in the Bible went through difficult times and they just hung on. So there's different ways that God can be with you in difficult circumstances, and I've found trying to make sure that I meet with God each morning as much as I can is so important. On a sort of similar vein, Sundays have been great for me. I've kind of brought up in a home where we try to keep Sundays separate, and whilst I'm not hugely legalistic about it now, that pattern in my week has been really helpful. So I try not to do much work on Sundays, and it just puts a break on that kind of like we were talking before about sort of trying to take a stop and complete something and reflect on how it's been. At least then I've got a forced kind of weekly cycle that just means that I can switch off a little bit and be a bit more normal with the family. If I've been stressed all week and ignored them, at least then they can see the real me. Perhaps on a Sunday when I've got that opportunity to relax. And I think the other thing I'd say is kind of, I've written down, do the right thing by faith. So what I mean by that is sometimes I've not wanted to stop like my work, because I typically do overwork. I haven't wanted to because I've got a meeting tomorrow and I wanted to be ready and I don't feel ready, or that I haven't quite got to the bottom of this particular problem and I just want to keep working at it to find out what I think the problem is, and that kind of thing. Sometimes I've just had to say, no, the right thing to do is actually to stop, because I haven't spent any time with the family, I haven't done this, or I've got these other obligations that I want to, and I just need to almost say to God, look, I don't feel ready to stop, but I'm going to stop because it's the right thing to do, and by faith I believe you'll pick up the slack, kind of thing. And I think that kind of attitude is important in different areas. So there's a lot of things like I don't know, maybe you've got a colleague who you're having to invest a lot of time in, and perhaps it's frustrating because you've got your own work to do, and this, that, and the other, or maybe you really know that you need to be proactive about something to kind of improve the culture, but you haven't really got time to do it with your existing workload. Sometimes, almost by faith, you have to say, look, I really believe I need to do this extra bit of work. I haven't got time for it, but by faith I'm going to do it because I think it's the right thing to do. So that's kind of another thing that I've felt is important to do in a workplace, just to kind of manage time and sort of manage other obligations outside of it as well. Yeah.
Well, that's really helpful to hear, and I think you've certainly, from what I've understood, really modelled that well. A kind of real commitment to work and to church life, serving, doing things beyond, time with people and family, and that's a challenge often, but really helpful to hear your experience. So maybe just as we bring things together, what would be a main encouragement that you would give to our listeners as they seek to live out faith in the working context, as they seek to grow in their discipleship in the workplace? What would be your final words of encouragement?
Well, I think work, and I mean that quite broadly, whatever, if it's paid work or unpaid, professional context or not, I think it's an opportunity I think it's a good thing for us. I think we need it. And I think it's an opportunity for us to be good at something, to show a characteristic of God in our makeup, that he gives us skills and he wants us to achieve things. He wants us to create things. He wants us to do something well. And so I genuinely believe this is our opportunity in a work context, whatever that work is. We can do something well, and that's good for us. It makes us feel good. It gives us satisfaction. It kind of fights against some of these negative things like boredom, like kind of restlessness and all these kind of stuff. It can be very healthy for us. And I just encourage people, if you are a worker as opposed to a boss kind of thing, to try and work out how you can make your work fit into those ideas that we had about sort of creation. Sort of try and make it into a situation where you can take a step back and say, that's good. I feel like I've really been able to achieve that. And I think probably for managers, it's a real opportunity for you to bless people who are working for you by helping them shape that kind of work structure. So I see it as a real opportunity. Work, it is hard, and there's lots of things sort of against us. But whilst work is cursed, God hasn't left. He's there, and he will bless work because he believes in it. And I think we just need to sort of take the opportunity and pray it through and see how we can make our work an opportunity to do something really good.
Oh, that's very, very helpful. Thank you so much, Daniel. So whatever you do, as Paul says in Colossians, in word or deed, do it in the name of Jesus for the glory of God. And we've talked about that practically. It's been really helpful to hear some of what you've shared from your own experience. So thank you so much for coming and joining us on this podcast. And I imagine there may be another opportunity in the future, whether that excites you or not. I'm sure it will. So thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, or watchers, to this YouTube episode. And do join us again on Postcards from Antioch. If ever you have an opportunity, do check out what we've got and what we've covered over previous episodes. So thank you. And thank you again, Daniel.